Scripture says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. That means your struggle isn't strange, it isn't shameful, and more importantly, it means God has already made a way through it. There have been moments in my life where I knew exactly what the right thing was, and I still didn't choose it. Not because I didn't love God, and not because I didn't care, but because I was tired, lonely, and looking for relief. Temptation didn't come as something evil or wild. It came as something familiar, something comforting, something that felt like it would quiet the noise for a moment. And every time I gave in, it wasn't peace that followed, it was emptiness, conviction, a heavier heart. I've learned that temptation doesn't show up when you're doing your worst. It shows up when you're trying to heal, when you're trying to change, and when you're finally choosing God. And that's why I want to talk about it today. Because if you're in that place, you're not weak, you're human, and you're not alone. Temptation doesn't show up looking evil, it shows up looking familiar, comforting, inviting. It shows up when you're already tired, frustrated, lonely, and just wanting peace for a moment. Temptation isn't just about sinful acts, it's about anything pulling you away from God, who God is shaping you to be. And to me, this is what temptation looked like. Wanting comfort when I was emotionally drained, letting old patterns feel safe again, thinking just this once won't hurt, feeling lonely and reaching for something that fills the moment but empties the soul. And the 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And the key point is, temptation is universal. You're not weak, you're human. Temptation can hit us when we least expect it, and it can feel like we're the only ones struggling. But in the Bible, it reminds us that no temptation we face is unique. It's human, it's common, and God is faithful. He won't let us be tempted beyond what we can bear, and He always provides a way out. So if you're in that moment right now, feeling trapped or ashamed, know this: you're not alone. This doesn't define you, and God's grace is bigger than any struggle you're facing. So, what is temptation? Let's keep it simple and grounded. Temptation is an invitation to satisfy a legitimate desire in a legitimate way. Examples: you wanting love, so you're settling for attention. You wanting peace, and you're settling for by escaping through habits. You're wanting connection by crossing boundaries. You're wanting relief by numbing instead of healing. And I want to clarify something, that temptation itself is not a sin. In Hebrew 4:15, it says, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has already been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Even Jesus was tempted. The sin is not the thought, it's the agreement. That's very important, right? Because a lot of times we have these lingering thoughts of, I know I shouldn't do this, but we still do it anyways. Our heart goes one direction while our mind goes to something familiar and something that's comforting. And these are some ways we can identify temptation. Temptation often comes quietly, not aggressively. So signs that you're being tempted is you start justifying things you once said no to. You feel rushed to decide. You hear nobody will know. You feel emotional pressure instead of peace. You begin hiding not just actions, but thoughts. For me, temptation often showed up when I was tired, emotionally vulnerable. It didn't come screaming or whispering. And in Jeremiah 17:9, it says, the heart is deceitful above all things. And sometimes temptation can disguise itself as relief, whether that's through drugs, whether that's through certain habits, whether that's through lust, porn, all that stuff. And it comes through the flesh, our desires. We want comfort, intimacy, and control. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, it says in Matthew 26:41. And it disguises itself through emotions: loneliness, anger, shame, stress, right? How many times have we been lonely and we're scrolling our phones and, we see the right thing and we act on that right thing or what we think is right? Anger, being mad at a friend or being mad at your significant other and, oh, I'm going to text my ex or I'm going to go chill with my ex. That's temptation. Nothing good comes from it. Then you have shame and stress, and that follows. But temptation often asks, what will make this feeling go away right now? And that's through familiar people or places, old relationships, old environments, old habits. Bad company corrupts good character, it says in Corinthians 15:33, and through timing. Late nights, moments of weakness, after progress, that one hits the hard, especially for me. It hits hard for me because I've been feeling like I'm on the right track, doing things the right way, and then something familiar comes along, and I'm like, my heart wants it so bad, but I know that it's not good for me emotionally, and it brings a lot of anxiety and stress and just overthinking. And then when that happens, I tend to overshare, over-explain, and it's not healthy for me. So yeah, after progress is a big one because we all feel like, man, I've gotten so far, but you go right back to rock bottom when you make one decision you knew you shouldn't have made. And it's not too late, right? It's all a learning lesson. It should be clarity at the end of the day, right? Whatever's in front of you, whatever signs that you're seeing, should tell you everything you should know. We can make excuses in our head, every single time and make up these scenarios. I know I do it all the time, but when I went to church yesterday, the pastor was saying, choosing the life of Christ and choosing that path, it's not a dandy, just once in a lifetime, path. You have to choose it every single day. You have to wake up. You have to choose God and you have to choose Christ and choose to to walk with faith. And that was very humbling for me, because yes, I can read the Bible, I can, talk about scripture all I want, but if I take 1 second and I just turn the other way, that 1 second can destroy everything. So you have to remember, like, choosing that path isn't going to be all peachy and all dandy and whatnot. No, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a struggle, but it's shaping you to the person that you're supposed to be. It's doing it for me, and I know it can do it for you too, especially when it comes to temptation. A lot of men, even I've had conversations with women that struggle with lust, and temptation is probably one of the biggest things that we face as humans, whether that's food, drinking, relationships, sexual desires, all that stuff plays a role into being tempted. And you could ruin something so great by making one decision. And so, in Matthew 4:2-3, it says, after fasting 40 days, the temper came. So temptation often comes after growth, not before. And for me, it was like using my life to relate was this. This is how temptation was for me. Wanting to do right, but choosing wrong. Conviction that I ignored. How temptation didn't satisfy. It drained me, and shame followed, not peace, right? Like we all look for that quick release and that quick, that quick, gratification, we look for that stuff, and we may have it in the act, but what follows afterwards is shame every single time. And you can relate that to a lot of things, especially like drugs or drinking, right? You're drinking, you're having a blast, and then you have the hangover, or you do something while you're blacked out. Same thing while you're smoking. I used to make the excuse that I smoked because it helped me sleep, but I would wake up feeling sluggish, lazy, and it just wasn't healthy. But through those times, and it does numb your discernment, right? It does pushes your soul down because, I in that particular moment, I wasn't thinking that, I was thinking that God abandoned me. I was thinking that I was condemning myself through these actions. But the reality was that God didn't abandon me. And conviction was mercy, and growth came through awareness. Um, in Psalms 51:10, it says, "Create in me a clean heart." God isn't shocked by your struggle. He's shaping you through it. And that's something that really helped me, like, heal. Just because before, I lived my life with no identity. I didn't know who I was at all. I was kind of dabbling in a bunch of different things, and I wasn't really looking to be shaped, or I wasn't looking to be fixed. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. Um, and there was a lot, and the first thing that I came to terms with was God wasn't centered around my life, and I'm in the process of, he's in the center, right? Above all else, God is, you know, the one I look for to love, the one I look for to build that relationship with, and I care about what the judgment looks like from God, and now I understand the saying, fear God, right? You hear it all the time. You should fear God, and it's not because He's gonna punish you or because He's, you know, evil or anything like that. It's I wasn't loved. I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel protected or secured or anything like that because I didn't know God. And that's scary, and I don't want to feel like that ever again, right? So when it says to fear God, that's kind of what I take to it. Um, and so yeah, just keep that in mind. Just keep in mind that God is shaping you through the struggle, through the hard times. But you have to keep moving forward, and you have to keep, um, you know, chipping the block. Just keep chipping the block, because yes, it may look rough, may feel rough, but through after through the process, it starts to take shape, and you start to begin to know who you are. So temptation. So and here's some side effects. Temptation promises relief, but it produces damage. And here's the side effects: spiritual dullness, guilt and shame, distance from God, emotional confusion, loss of self respect, hardened heart if repeated. And all of these side effects that I just named is personal. I used to always tell people I had no soul. Um, I was ignoring my soul. I didn't, you can see it in my face. Like I wasn't, I was empty for sure. Um, Guilt and shame, making a certain decision and looking back and like, why did I do that? That was silly. That was dumb. Distance from God. I knew God existed, but I didn't care, or I didn't think to put any time or energy to knowing God, to knowing love. Emotional confusion. This is built off relationships that I've had in the past, relationships that weren't healthy, but thinking that, this is what love is, this is what it looks like, and I should bear it, I should suffer through it because this is what it means. Loss of self-respect. I didn't care how I looked. I didn't care about my haircut. Didn't care about the way I dressed. Didn't care about a lot of things. I would probably tear myself down the majority of the time. Oh, I look ugly, or my teeth. I would talk with my mouth closed, if that makes any sense. Very, very monotoned when I was talking. That was because I had no self-respect. I had no confidence. And here I am, sending out these videos. I still feel kind of cringy watching these, but it's a process. It's gonna get better. I know it's gonna get better, and I know that it's gonna help people. I've had people tell me that, like, just getting the raw version is very relatable, and that's what I want to give every single time. I want to give. No, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm gonna give it how it is, and I'm gonna talk. And a lot of it's through my experiences and what I've gone through. And anybody can tell you, I would not share my feelings or thoughts with anybody. And here I am, posting the stuff on YouTube and sharing it with the world to see. It's a scary thing, but it's also a big relief, because a lot of things that I've kept inside for a very long time, was definitely, comes to the last part, hardening my heart. I wrote this letter recently to God. It was a letter to God, and it talked about, it pretty much talked about, like, who I was as a child, and why I became this individual that was so hardened on the inside and so guarded and protected. And and what's crazy is, like, this isn't stuff that I just remembered. I was just writing down, and as it was coming along, I'm like, oh wow, like, this makes a lot of sense. As a kid, I was a super, super loving kid. I had a huge heart. I cared about everybody. I don't even remember times I was just super angry or had hate in my heart. I had a very, very good heart. I still do, but I had to protect it because, throughout time and growing up in an environment where you're around a bunch of people who are tough, who are, who view you as a tough person, and in all honesty, I'm not a tough person. I still have a huge heart. I'm not someone who just likes to fight or just, be physical. I've gotten to one fight in my life, and it was with a friend, and it was just one punch. Yeah, so it wasn't no crazy stuff, But I had to put this persona on that I'm just this. Oh, you can't mess with me, or else I'm gonna tear you up. That's not me at all. But it's so crazy because I know that I still have the same heart that I had when I was 7 years old, 6 years old. Still that soft kid, loving, kind, generous, well mannered. Built a lot of relationships with people who judge off of, people that look like me. Then they meet me and they're just like, wow, like, you're very calm and collected, you're chill, very reserved, which I am. But just certain relationships, certain friendships just kind of hardened my heart to where I had to become this whole different person. So, so yeah. In James 1:15, it says, then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin gives birth to death. Now, we can kind of dive deep into that, right? When the desire has conceived, when you make the agreement to follow through with temptation, you're giving birth to sin. That's going to start the process of dampening your soul, bringing you down, making you walk with guilt. And I've walked with guilt for years, probably since my first daughter was born. That was almost 12 years ago, you know. And it's based off a decision that I knew that I shouldn't have made, but still made it anyways. You know, and you just have to build off of that foundation, which was it was always collapsing. Every single time it collapsed, and I found myself in the hole deeper than before. And when it says it gives birth to death, it's not saying physical death, but spiritual numbness. I was with a person who was very spiritual, super spiritual, and I did not understand it. And I remember being like a kid and being in middle school and stuff, being such a spiritual person, just filled with light. I remember people used to tell me like, you know, oh, you're like the life of the party, or you're, you know, and I've always wanted to be that person. You know, I want to see people smile. I want to see them happy. But the path that I was going down was not a happy one. It was a very, very dark place. Started to get into drugs, nothing crazy, nothing heavy. I was drinking a lot. I used to like to take shots. But oh man, all that was doing was just numbing me, you know, because yes, it was a relief, but it was a temporary one. And I always found myself going right back to that dark place, which was, you know, solitude. I was okay with being by myself, loved it, you know, distracted myself through video games and movies. And I just disconnected from the world, from people, actually, not the world, but people. Disconnected so hard. And this is what temptation does to the soul. You know, it pulls you out of alignment. It trains the soul to crave substitutes. It weakens your discernment. It makes you forget who you are. And like, that was me, you know. I used to tell myself, I don't know who I am. I need to find that person. I had no idea what discernment was. I confused discernment with like there's something wrong with me, right? If I'm around somebody and they have these thoughts or these feelings towards me, you know, my discernment says, you know, that this person's just not okay to be around. But I blame myself every single time. And man, it trains the soul to crave substitutes. You know, there shouldn't be a substitute for God. There isn't one, right? Our hearts should lean to God, to reading the Bible, to understanding the Bible, going to church. Go to church. I went to church yesterday, and there was this family that just stood out to me because I never seen them before. But you know, they were there. Their faces looked like they didn't want to be there, but something brought them there. You know, and I kept just looking. I kept like, man, like I want to pray for these people. Like I want to know what's going on. Like I want to know if there's anything that I can do to help. You know, like can I pull that family over there for one of the pastors to pray for them? I want to do that, and it just caught my attention. You know, like, and then everything that they were talking about in church, you can just feel the shift. You know, and the church was full. It was full of people, but this one particular family just stuck out the most. And hopefully I see him there more. You know, I think it makes me happy seeing stuff like that. So, you know, obviously they're going through grief, loss, something. You can see it all over their faces. And they wanted to grow. They wanted to change. They wanted to seek God. And that's where it starts. But here's the truth. Temptation doesn't define you. How you respond does. In James 4:7, it says, submit yourself then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. He will flee from you. I had that sucker in my ear for years, telling me like, it's okay, just this once, you can do it, and that was, man, it shaped my life the way it was, and I don't know, it's it's hard to put into words, because now that I'm thinking about it, it's like he's always been there, and I've allowed it. I shoved everything else away and allowed evil to manipulate my brain, to shelter my heart. So, so yeah, just having this spiritual awakening definitely showed me a lot of stuff, and it started with clarity and discernment, and conviction. Now it's easy for me to, I'm not gonna say easy, but it's like, if I had to choose from every decision that I make in my life, and I know that this is going to be the best decision versus this decision, I'm going to always go to the good decision. I may stumble. I'm human. I may make mistakes, but and that's fine. That's something that I'm going to have to go through. But praying about it, giving that to God is what's going to ultimately help me climb that ladder to get out the mud that I'm stuck in. So if you're struggling with temptation right now, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not dirty, broken, or too far gone. You're in a battle, and battles mean you're still alive. I encourage you to have awareness over shame, progress over perfection, dependence on God over self-will, right? Don't rely on yourself to make certain decisions, because you're going to make the ones that are more comfortable, the ones that are more inviting. Read the Bible. What would God want me to do? What's the right thing to do? Always tell yourself that. What is the right thing to do? And sometimes that right thing might take you away from certain people. Sometimes that thing might, change your whole perspective on life, who your friends are, what relationships you have, what family members you should be around, and how you conduct yourself at work. So self-will, we have it, but what do we choose? Like, what are we choosing to do with it? For me, is to try to, be the light, to be a light in somebody else's life, to help them through the struggles that they're facing, because I've gone through it. I'm going through it. But I've been filled with happiness, peace, joy, and I think the world needs more of it. We live in I keep reiterating this, but we live in such a horrible time. And there's only one person that matters the most, and one relationship that matters the most. And that's the one with God. And even if you don't believe, right? Even if you have your own beliefs, and you are more happy being who you are, that's okay too, right? That's how you have God gave you free will for a reason, and if you choose to make your own path and it's working for you, then so be it, you know. But it wasn't working for me, and now just reading the Bible and understanding certain things, especially in Proverbs. I definitely want to live my life according to the Bible. I definitely want to be Christ-like. I definitely want my heart to shine on everybody. The good heart that I had when I was a kid, I want that person to still exist. Person still exists. I just, have to learn how to let go of resentment and let go of fear and anger, anxiety in order for that to happen. But that's gonna, once that happens, I think that blessings upon blessings is going to happen. It sucks that physically, I'm not around a lot of people by choice. So it's hard to find people to talk to and to really let out the emotions. But I don't think that's anybody else's, nobody should else carry that burden, is ultimately what I'm trying to say. So I'm doing that with God, right? All the stresses that I've had, all the, nervousness and confidence issues that I've had, it kind of helped me to go to that path. But I want to leave you guys with this scripture, and then just James, verse 1 through 12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life. Perseverance, under trial is amazing. Jesus persevered, even though it cost him his life. But he lived a perfect life, right? Internally. He didn't have hatred in his heart. He didn't have greed, lust. No, he fed 5,000 people. But here are my final words. I know temptation is real, and I know it can feel impossible sometimes, but remember that you are not alone in the struggle. Every time you feel weak, God is right there, ready to strengthen you. Take it one moment at a time, one choice at a time, and don't let shame define you. You are stronger than your mistakes, and your journey is not over. Keep your eyes on him and keep walking forward. You've got this, and more importantly, he's got you. Temptation may knock, but you don't have to open the door, because Jesus already made a way out, and his grace is stronger than your weakest moment. You guys have a good rest of your day, and stay blessed.